Welcome to the FMCG Guys, the podcast that dives into the innovation, strategy, and trends shaping consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond.
Welcome to the FMCG Guys podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Torres. When I'm not hosting this podcast, I'm the director of executive search at Dwyer Partners, where I recruit top talents in consumer goods and retail. And guess what type of people we speak in this podcast? Exactly. It's top talents, leaders, and luminaries in the consumer goods and retail industries. If this is the first time you tune in, we have now over 180 episodes that you can listen to. So do go into our website or your favorite podcast platform to entertain yourself and hopefully be educated by some of the industry's top voices and a bit from ourselves as well. And remember, we are part of a family of podcasts, which is headed by the CPG guys in the US, where Peter and Shri bi-weekly also, actually in the last week, it's been 3 episodes a week, which is crazy, speak about the omni-channel consumer goods world on the other side of the Atlantic in the US. By the way, we also have a very active LinkedIn page with 16,000 followers and counting. So you can also find us there to find our latest episodes, industry news, events we go to, and other interesting stuff. And of course, this podcast wouldn't be the same without the great people that we have as hosts and the great guests that we have. But on the side of the hosts today, we have my co-host, Christina Nicolau. Hey, Christina, how are you?
Hi, Daniel. I'm doing very well, counting our followers. And we had the first people calling us celebrities this week. So it's going well.
I know it feels strange, but it feels some way good. I guess it's a recognition to the effort we put into this. So, and to you putting up with me every week or two as well, which that takes.
Yes, we should be getting extra credit for that, indeed. Yeah.
I'm sure you will at due course, don't worry. So at the other side of the table, we have a representative of one of the largest brands in consumer electronics, Philips, and it's their SVP and head of Philips Personal Care for Western Europe, Marlies Gebetsberger. Hi, Marlies, how are you?
Hey, nice to meet you and see you again, Daniel.
Yes.
I'm very good.
we met in a very rainy day in Cannes in June. It's nice to see you again.
Absolutely. And it was nice to have also some sun afterwards in between.
Yeah, but that was an intense week, wasn't it?
It was very intense, but also really, really interesting and worth it. So it was my first time in Cannes and I enjoyed a lot and I learned a lot.
And probably see you next year there, I imagine.
We have some plans, yes.
Exactly.
After the big recognition, but I think we will talk about it in a minute.
We will. Yes, well, yeah. I mean, you went, like for the first, considering it was the first time that you went, I think you did very well, at least much better than I did. It took me like 5 days to know what was going on there. It was very good, but it is quite overwhelming. So Marlies, we'll definitely talk about that, but curious to know, how did you end up in FMCG?
Yeah, listen, I think that's a big question with, of course, many prerequisites that came into play. I strongly believe, and that's probably a little bit of a philosophical comment, but I believe people successful in FMCG probably have certain personalities that drive them for success, right? So it's probably less of what you're studying or what you're specializing in order to be in this industry. I think what brought me here is my very, very big curiosity for people and how they live and what they do and how they behave and why and big curiosity combined with an interest for driving change in their behavior and driving improvements in daily lives.
Yeah, I think that one thing that's common in our industry is that people really like what they do. Like they're passionate about like the products and the people. And that's why I think that a lot of people that leave the industry end up going back or wanting to get back in it. And you started your career, you've basically been for now a 2-company leader. So you started at Unilever, right?
Yes, so I mean, during my studies, and I ended up then for my studies in a very traditional business administration field, so not very fancy. But I figured out throughout my studies that marketing as such is a field that I find extremely exciting and interesting. And throughout my studies, I realized that there are a few companies out there that really can help me to grow within the field of marketing. And Unilever was for me always my dream employer, and I managed to then get started there.
And now you're in Philips, right? And you're in the personal health space, let's say, looking after West Europe. Tell us a little bit about what is your role now, what you do, what's the portfolio that you have?
Yeah, Philips is a super interesting company because it's really about a much bigger mission that we are after, right? Because we are covering consumer health and professional healthcare. And our mission is to improve the lives of 2.5 billion people per year with really like meaningful, impactful innovation. When you think about, of course, the healthcare space and the life-saving measures that we are implementing every day and that we are having present with patients, that's an enormous delight to work for. But we're also carrying it over to the consumer space, and that's where I'm responsible for. So I'm working in the consumer space, we are covering mother and child care territory, or healthcare territory, and also the grooming and well-being space.
And what type, like, if we were for a consumer, what type of products would be the most famous ones in the portfolio?
Of course, I mean there are many, but probably the most iconic in terms of Philips innovation back in the days is the Philips shaver, I think. So we were the ones inventing the so-called rotary shaving technology, which is a different way of shaving your skin, much more skin-friendly and gets much closer to your skin. In the 1930s, actually Philips got inspired by Dutch bicycles who are also circling like this.
Wow.
and Philips, based on that, invented the technology. And still today, of course, that's a huge consumer base that we have. But we have been reinventing ourselves over the years, right? So we have created completely new categories. For example, the IPL technology, which is a technology that removes hair with the help of light. And our iconic product is Philips Lumea, which is a fantastic device that without any pain is removing hair. And over time, you can have hair-free skin for more than 12 months. And that technology was invented by Philips. So you already see when I talk about Philips, it's all about being obsessed with what consumers want or what they could feel as a benefit. And based on that, really driving a breakthrough technology to overcome that.
And you bring a lot of energy when you talk about the innovation that's coming from Philips. What excites you most now? Tell us a product.
Yeah, what I love about Philips, I will come to the product, but for me, it's much more than the product. So for me, the product is, of course, then the ultimate device that's in people's homes. And of course, that alone is already nice. But what just excites me about the Philips brand is that it's so purposeful, right? And Daniel, you also said it, it's a very, very famous brand. We are, of course, also licensing out the brand in many other fields, and that's why many people know it so well. But each time now when we're innovating, we really ask ourselves, okay, how can we improve the people's lives? I think a great example, and also one of my most favorite categories, is the baby category, where in the mother and child care space, we are really innovating for improving the moms and parents, but also babies' lives. And a great example is a new bottle that we launched last year. It's a feeding bottle, but it's actually a bottle that really mimics how the mom's breast is working, like literally. Because when a baby is born, it has to start learning how to drink from the mother's breast, right? And it's quite interesting to think about this. It's a lot of work for the baby to do this. And of course, we want to encourage breastfeeding because the best, like, for your baby is the mom's milk. But we also want to empower moms to have, her life and to get help from others. So we are offering a bottle that mimics the breast. So switching between breast and the bottle is super easy for the baby. The baby continues to make an effort in drinking from the bottle, and therefore is also happy to switch back to the breast. And imagine the liberation for moms because she can share the care. Because if you have a small baby and you're breastfeeding, I tell you, I've done this twice, it's a lot of work. It's actually a full-time job to do this. So it's really nice also for the mom to be able to share those precious moments with partners, but also the care with others.
Yeah.
I guess people who are not in, they don't have families and stuff might not really relate to that. But having had friends who had recently kids, I completely understand how this is really a solution, like being afraid to switch to bottle because they don't want to abrupt the breastfeeding process and so on. So it feels like, oh, here is a solution for you. And that's something that actually is going to help improve your life. So I love that example. And I was not aware of it.
And we are also recognized for this, right? So midwives across the world are really recommending Philips Avent bottles. And of course, also because of our health heritage, we have a lot of credibility also to driving improvements in that space.
No, and I think that the common thing around the Philips portfolio is that you're really covering very basic needs, like, brushing your teeth, childcare, shaving, and it's you elevate that experience in a lot of levels, no? And I think that that's kind of the common trend and where Philips kind of decided to go to. It's just, as you said, it is very purposeful, right? Which is very cool. So Marlies, so you spent, looking at your LinkedIn, you spent over 8 years at Unilever and now coming to 10 years at Philips. Tell us, and obviously you've had a great career because you've reached a certain level that not many people reach, and now you're leading, I assume, quite a big team. When did you get your first leadership experience and how was that?
Well, my very first leadership experience I got quite early in Unilever when I led a brand team for a country. So I started in the field of savory. So the Knorr brand is still very present everywhere. Yeah. And I had the pleasure of leading that in Austria back in the days. And since it was foods, of course, it's very important to be locally relevant and also how you market the brand. So we had a lot of course, activations also on the ground with local recipes, local chefs. And there I had the chance to already lead a small team with junior marketing managers. And that was, of course, a great learning opportunity for me to grow over time. Of course, the teams became bigger, but yeah, the earlier you're exposed to learning on the job, the more effective I believe it is.
Yeah, and you got that on your second role. So with 1 year and a half or 2 years experience, getting leadership experience, that's one of the key building blocks, really.
Yes, indeed. So, I mean, how Unilever operated back in the days, and I think it's still the case today, they hired from university the graduates, and then you go through the graduate program. So I went through the graduate program, which was, of course, super good to really understand the company. And then after that, I started as a brand manager, indeed, in Knorr, and moved then into the ice cream space afterwards.
And you did say that this was quite intentional, right? It was like, which company can help me grow and learn? And then you decide to go with Unilever. So with your first kind of leadership role, do you remember any kind of distinct things that you came out of it and were like, okay, this is something new that I learned now, something that you would like to share?
I think one learning part was, of course, marketing as such, right? It's less linked to leadership, but more to marketing as such, where, of course, a company like Unilever particularly taught me many things around how to really understand the consumer, how to listen well to the consumer, how to really, start from that in everything you do, even if you are in sales or wherever you are. I think that was really, really helpful. Now, of course, from a leadership perspective, you learn a lot by observing others. I think that's for early career starters always something I give as an advice, especially now when we say post-COVID, offices are back open, come to the office, take the opportunity to participate in physical meetings, because you will learn the most by observing your leader or your leader's leader and how they interact with each other and how it makes an impact on you and what you take out of it. So I think that was my first, learning journey there, to really learn from the best leaders that I was exposed to.
Yeah, now you've been leading for what quite obviously since your second role in your career, you've managed people, if not practically all the roles that you've had. And now how many people are you managing now, actually? How big is your current organization?
My current organization overall is quite sizable. So it's around 500 people. Obviously, I do not lead them directly.
Not all direct reports, though, no? There would be a lot of one-to-ones.
But indeed, I think, of course, over the time, you're changing a lot your leadership style, right? And of course, also, it's always about the situation. Every person is different. And every leadership challenge is, of course, different. So while today my task is much more to coach other leaders to be effective and to be successful, back in the days, of course, in my early career, it was much more to really help young graduates or younger people to get started, to really understand how things are going, to really give much more context, to be there very close day to day and guide them through it. So, of course, that has changed considerably.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, right? And I think that to know who you're leading and what the person is capable of and what they need is really a lot of the secret sauce of our leadership, right? It's not necessarily about being like the best speaker or definitely not about having all the answers. No, it's more about really understanding your team and being able to establish the right, not to be their friend necessarily, but to establish the right working relations and leadership relationship with them, no?
Yeah, and I believe also that leadership requirements have changed dramatically over the last 10 years. That's also what you hear a lot, of course, in the industry. Yeah, I'm a big supporter actually of that change. And it's much more about empathy and helping others to grow while not shying away from productive feedback when required, right? So I think that's always, of course, the magic recipe to do both, but always in the interest of helping your colleague to grow. And the other thing that I really learned a lot from actually is not necessarily with the people I directly led. So very often in a big corporation, and of course that is very often also in FMCG, you are leading interdisciplinary teams. You have a project. I remember in Unilever, I led innovation projects, and you need to make sure that people in R&D, people in supply chain, people wherever they are, even geographically in different places, follow you and your ideas. And I think that is even probably a better learning journey to lead people that do not directly report to you, but making sure that they're with you, that they're following you, that they drive, support your change agenda. Quite exciting actually to work on those things.
Quite exciting indeed. And at the same time, the things that you're mentioning, Marlies, are also a lot of the challenges that most leaders face, right? So how do I balance on one side, having that empathy and understanding where the person that I'm managing is coming from, and at the same time being able to deliver the direct feedback in a way that's going to be constructive, and even more so how these apply when you have a cross-functional team where these people are not directly reporting to you. So how have you personally find a little bit of that balance there? Do you have any kind of tips or points of view that you find in your everyday work?
I think first of all, what I would like to give is an advice to anyone, especially when you have the chance to work in a big corporation that is globally present, to really move around, because you learn a lot by just exposing yourself to different cultures, because that, of course, builds your flexibility muscle in how you treat people and how you work with people. So that is an advice. On a day-to-day, it's a concept that I think many people know. I actually have the book here with me. It's called Radical Candor. Which is not a very new concept. It has been around for quite a while, but it's very good to embrace, because it's actually, the philosophy is actually very simple. You really want to make sure that the other succeeds. So it's not about you, it's not about me, and my success is about you, and how I make sure that my colleague is successful. And when I embrace that mindset, I will already care for the person, because that's the intrinsic motivation for even working on something. And then realizing that if you do not directly share what could be improved or how the person could be more successful, then you will not achieve that mission. So Radical Candor means challenging directly while caring personally. And yeah, that's a mantra that I'm using every day, and I'm also sharing with my team. And it's a learning journey, by the way. So, and again, everyone is different, and you're adapting your style based on the other person, but it's super effective.
And how do you balance that, like, radical candor, which, as you said, is about like challenging but caring personally, with actually getting results out of the team?
Yeah, I think it's not a balance at all. I think it's a means to the results. So you can always go in a directive leadership style shortcut to a result. That can work, but I would not discard directive leadership, because in some situations you need to be directive. If you have a crisis, I mean, let's remember when we had COVID and we had a lockdown or whatever, that you don't have, you need to act in the moment, and you need to be extremely clear, and there should not be any debate. But in normal circumstances, you want to make sure that people follow you and that they themselves feel equipped and empowered to drive the right things for the business. And I'm convinced, and I see also in our results, that this is the right way to drive long-term sustainable success.
So at the end of the day, it is about trust, right? So I'm trusting my leader that they want me to be successful, and they want the company and my team to be successful. And therefore, we can have this kind of relationship without friction, because I understand where the other person is coming from.
Yes, and it's very effective once you dare to go there. And in Philips, we are working a lot on this. We have we call it impact with care. Our whole culture movement that we are driving, and it's of course super nicely also linked to our bigger mission in Philips to improve people's lives and having a better impact on people and planet. But we also see a lot of resonance from our teams, because in the end, of course, we are very customer and consumer focused, but we're equally people focused in the sense of making them successful. And impact with care for us doesn't mean only, to only be empathetic. It's also about impact, which means results. So having that intrinsic focus on external needs, on our customers, on our consumers, of course, is at the center of it, right? And then when you start from there and you build your coaching agenda with your employees or with your colleagues, I think it's a quite powerful, but yet very simple approach.
Yeah, I like the impact part instead of growth, which growth can sound like growth for the sake of growth. Impact actually subconsciously or consciously feels like it makes an impact on people's lives as well, no? Which again is what going back to the mission that you have as a company. So it's ties it nicely. And with that approach as a company and your personal leadership style, whenever you're hiring leaders for your team, what is what type of personality traits do you look for?
So first of all, I am a strong supporter of diversity in teams. So I don't look for one profile. And very often I have to be very conscious about not being, in your own bias or in my bias of hiring someone that is very similar to me. So I actually try to really look at how does my team at the moment look like? Of course, also what is the requirement for the role? Because every role also has different needs, also for personality traits. But then also really seeing how does then the whole profile fit within the overall team to drive most impact. But very often it's linked to personality and beliefs, values, and the behavior that people display, right? Of course, we also look a lot around at the backgrounds, at the experiences, of course. But very often in the end, you have a set of candidates, and then you look at behavior and culture.
Yeah, and the experience part is kind of like, quote unquote, the easy part, no? Maybe it's difficult to find somebody that has the experience that you're looking for, but once you find them, that's okay, you've ticked the box, unless they're lying, which doesn't happen really at these levels. But then where it really gets complicated, and that's a fascinating part of recruitment as well, as that culture fit, that personality, so many things, right? That form a person's way of being, that to get it right, you have to have very clear what you want, and also a good way of analyzing it.
Absolutely. No, and I think we have, of course, a good approach to this. Now, I also would like to talk about that fit, because very often, diversity and fit might not be in sync. And I think, so what I've learned over my hiring experience is some daring moves that I decided for were extremely successful. So I have hired people that really came and then challenged us big time on how we do things for better.
Wow.
And of course, that is uncomfortable also for me as a leader, but it was so impactful so of course it always needs to have the right moment. But that's a big learning that I had as a hiring manager.
I guess that company culture needs to move along with that kind of thinking, though, right? Because you also want to make sure that this person who comes, who might have a big impact on challenging, they also need to be successful in the company. So you need to have a company that will embrace this kind of thinking and be able to help them grow as they grow along with the company. And I feel that I don't know how you've seen it, Marlies, but it feels like the corporate work culture is changing a lot. So we do see a lot of more diversity, of course, versus where we were like 50 years ago, completely different. But also we see a lot of change now happening with new generations coming in. COVID and the way we work has shifted a lot of things. Some companies get it right. Some feel like they're still stumbling a bit. How do you see it? How do you see corporate culture changing?
A lot, and I saw, of course, also throughout COVID that leaders had to act quite differently, right? And I think we are also realizing that every year we have a new normal, or every quarter we have a new normal, depending on where we look at, right? With unfortunately also very impactful events that we see across the globe that are, of course, influencing our business. So being it the supply chain crisis, war in Ukraine, whatever. So really impactful events, right? So it's a lot about also having that agility in looking at things combined with resilience, I think. And that's also a trait that we look at a lot, of course. It's probably not that obvious in the Western world because, we have been probably not, or Europe, not used to so many big disruptions, while other parts in the globe very much have been, right? So I believe that is, at least for me, in my European responsibility now, something I look very much at: resilience and agility.
A lot of scenario planning going on in most companies, I guess.
Yes, of course. And also, at the same time, many things have not changed in marketing and in business, right? I mean, starting with the consumer, understanding what the real triggers and barriers are, how to improve, what is the real pain point, what's the tension you want to serve, right? Or want to solve, and working backwards there. And of course, then how to get there is different because today we have TikTok and we have other means to engage with our audiences. But I think the basics in business have not changed. It's more how we look at it and how we work together has accelerated, and we need to just embrace that.
Yeah.
Every day is a new day.
No, absolutely. And I mean, that's the thing. Every day you have news of companies that are going back totally to the office, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, even like Amazon in the US, which is a very they have a very specific way of working, and you would think, well, they're kind of like, and they're like very analytical, very data driven, and then you would be like, this is like the perfect company to go fully remote. And they had the mandate to go back to Seattle, right? So for companies that are also, and I think in FMCG, a lot of them are very like more relationship driven and so on. I think that having that FaceTime is necessary, but still you want to give flexibility. So finding that balance, I think, is still work in progress.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's a very interesting topic. And we as Philips also believe that we work better when we are together. I mean, and it's quite simple, right? And it's true, because when people are now back at work, we had also great moments this year where we could bring a few people together, you really realize the power of the group and the power of, and then of course great ideas come, right? But for me, it's not one or the other. Of course, we also need to give people enough flexibility. But at the same time, we want to make sure that they are growing themselves, and you do not grow alone in front of a screen the whole day. So that is very clear. And I feel also Amazon, I work a lot, of course, with Amazon. It's a big customer of ours. Indeed also has realized this. Even in Amazon, people are people. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of Amazon, by the way, I'm curious to know, like, with COVID, obviously, like the online channel really exploded. How did that affect like your business and like your route to market and your sales channel mix?
So first of all, when I joined Philips 10 years ago, already then e-commerce was a huge part of the business. And that's probably also why I like this business so much, because I feel like the classical FMCG is really like quite behind. So we have always pioneered actually e-commerce as a brand, because we just saw that our consumers are there. And now, of course, you're right, COVID accelerated big time. We were ready for this because we had certain setups in place already in that time. Of course, we also accelerated our direct consumer business with that. So that channel mix has changed since then a little. But so far, of course, e-commerce stays our biggest and most relevant channel. Of course, we still have electrical retail, but also electronic retail is omni-channel. So big part of that portion is going through e-commerce as well. And every other even drug or more food type of retailer is e-commerce in the meantime. So, and the big advantage for us as Philips is that we are helping now those retailers actually to get along the journey to really embrace omni-channel and improve in e-commerce.
It's so interesting, right, Daniel, to have someone on the podcast who's in FMCG and they're saying like, yeah, e-commerce is our biggest channel, because everybody's like, it's growing, it doesn't have the numbers yet, but it's growing fast and we need to put focus. Usually that's how the conversation goes. But guys, you met in Cannes and we discussed briefly at the opening about the award that you guys with Philips won. So want to tell us a little bit more about that, Marlies?
And that was really a great recognition for the team. So yeah, it was the first time that I went to Cannes, but even as personal health team, we had quite a good agenda for being present in Cannes with also other things than the award, of course. And we submitted work, of course, because we have great work in marketing. And then we got shortlisted, which is already fantastic. And then in the end, we even received the highest recognition that we could have dreamt of, which was the Grand Prix in the category of business transformation, with something that I believe is really meaningful and relevant and super also fitting with our brand purpose. And it's an initiative that we are driving, which is called Better Than You, with our refurb editions. And I believe also because we are so strong in e-commerce as an industry, but also because with that you have returns, of course, because in e-commerce that's part of the business. We have also a duty at hand as a supplier and as a manufacturer to do something about this, right? Because many products are being returned and it's quite difficult to figure out where they land. Of course, we do everything we can as Philips to have agreements in place to get as many of those products back. And that was also why we submitted in the category of business transformation, because this is not just a campaign. This is really a whole full ecosystem that we had to set up from scratch in order to make sure that we are getting our products back, that we are making sure that we are refurbishing them in the right quality that is the highest standard that we, of course, want to have as Philips. Every product that we are refurbishing in our very professional refurbishment protocol is checked in the end. It has the same high quality like a new product. And then we're bringing it back into the let's say, flow. It's a real circular approach back into the business, selling it on e-commerce. And we're also prioritizing those refurbished editions in our own direct consumer business, but also together with our retailers who are working to get more traction on that.
And perhaps just for our listeners, let's recap a little bit if they are not familiar with the concept of the refurbished goods. So a lot of times we have products being returned. We see a lot of that happening also through Amazon because they have a very, let's say, easy for customers to return policy. And most of those products might end up in waste. While when you refurbish something, you get something that has been returned and you return it to good as new. condition, and then you're able to sell it again, and then the consumer can get also a bit of a benefit when it comes to pricing, but it's still at the same condition as you could get a new product. And that has been your focus, right? To make sure that we don't have any products ending up, or at least not as many products, ending up as waste because they have been returned, but rather we return them back into the ecosystem of the sales network.
Absolutely. And I feel that as a big corporation, you really can make an impact. And as Philips, we really have extremely high commitments to ESG, the highest in the industry. We are already refurbishing more than 20% of our overall portfolio, particularly, of course, in healthcare. Imagine those big machines, MRT or whatever machines. And of course, we are using very scarce raw materials in many of our products, right? So this is really part of our DNA, and we cannot say we want to improve people's lives and life and well-being without taking care of this, right? It's our task and our duty. But what I'm extremely proud of is that also in the consumer space, we are really taking the lead on this. There are not so many other manufacturers who do it at that scale. And we have a high commitment to do this more. And indeed, it's exactly what you say. It's real circular. But we also started a little bit there with the consumer, right? Because consumers still have the barrier to think, okay, listen, a refurbished product, is it really, is it good enough? And we even brought it to the next level now with gifting, because many of our products, which is great, are nice presents. But then if you want to give a gift, do you feel confident in giving a refurbished gift? So there are still a lot of doubts in consumers' minds if this is the best way to show up in front of a birthday, friend. So yeah, we are looking at those consumer barriers again, also when we then develop our communication platform. And that's what we initiated this year, and we will, of course, continue scaling it across.
Yeah, and I think that having like the manufacturer actually taking ownership of that refurbishment process, when I think of myself as a consumer, it definitely gives a seal of quality and to the whole thing, right? So, and Marlies, are there any other, because I know that you're a marketer at heart, are there any other products that you're particularly excited about?
Well, of course, one proposition that we have invented and very successfully marketed over the last years is Philips One Blade, which is an interesting case because actually the ambition was really to create. So now we started actually with the insight. So consumers, male consumers who want to shave or style their beards, want to have a very simple solution, right? They don't want to be busy with 5 different tools. I mean, men, sorry to say that, but they want simple things, right? So we created something which we call Philips One Blade. So you have one blade and it does it all. It can style, it can shave, it can trim. You have one very simple blade and it does it, right? We launched it like years ago. It since then has actually revolutionized the male grooming category. And we have actually contributed to the trend of people, not coming to office every day clean shaven, but actually, if you look around how your friends show up, very often, of course, they have different types of beard styles, right? Dylan, I don't know, I cannot see it from the distance. If you're clean shaven or not?
I shave every day, but I'm like, I practically don't know anyone in my age group that does that. So I'm like the exception.
And that's interesting what you say, because indeed, that's, of course, something that also comes very much from the younger generation. So we had the plan to create a sub-brand within the Philips family that is distinctive enough to be also bold enough to go. And Philips One Blade is. So we chose for a different color palette. We also, our communication is very bold. We are owning the territory of gaming, for example, where we are really, big and very famous in the gaming industry as a sort of partner in crime. Just as an example, we've just started our collaboration with the Icon League in Germany, which is a new way of playing the game with the football, no one else than very famous Toni Kroos, who is, of course,
yes.
Spain. Probably not in Barcelona, but in Madrid.
No, not here.
Together with a very strong Twitch streamer, are creating that league, and we are collaborating with them. So we are not just inventing a new proposition, but we're also inventing how we do marketing with that. And that is extremely successful. So penetration penetration is huge in our target group, and of course there's still more to grow in that business. It was an exciting journey, and super proud to be part of this. Also super proud of the teams, of course, who are committed every day to driving that proposition to the next level.
And also very different. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Very different, very useful. It feels. I was looking at going through some material before our podcast, Marlies. I was looking at the collaboration with Pantone and this very bright lime green. I was thinking, okay, this is very Brat, right? So it's very much in kind of like the aesthetics of this summer. So it feels very much very strong, let's say, and not in a place where you would expect personal care products, where they're usually a little bit more pale and, you know, just more on the feel good and care kind of feeling.
Indeed, and that I think is so great, because also with that Better Than You, I think with each of these executions, if you look at them, we were bold enough to break category codes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And bold enough to starting with the consumer and understanding what we want to stand for, and then being bold enough to really push the edges. And that's what I love about Philips, because we have a few of these where we can really showcase our power. Of course, also backed up by amazing technology. I think that's the other piece, that it's not just about an incremental change of a product. Very often we really have, I mean, one blade as a technology is unique. It's patented, it's uncopied so far, even so many have tried. But the performance is not easy to get somewhere else, right? So it's unique, and then we are also getting unique ways to bring it to our consumers.
Yeah, it's really like the harnessing the power of like the R&D engineering, like making an amazing technical product, but then being able to market it, no?
Yes.
And you can't, well, like for long-term success, you can't really have one without the other, no?
Absolutely. And that's, by the way, also the DNA of Philips. It's super interesting as well, because our two founders, Anton and Gerard, they were brothers back in Eindhoven, and they were very different, each of them. So one was the engineer, that really was one of the best and most famous engineers in the Netherlands. And the other one was the salesman. And that is, let's say, still in the DNA of Philips, that you have the engineering part being very strong, breakthrough technologies, but at the same time, you have that marketing and commercial DNA.
That's great. And Marlies, you've shared like part of like your leadership journey and how you started very early on with leadership, and now you have this very senior position in Philips. Let's not deny that. If you had to choose one thing that you've learned, that if you had to go back, if you could go back to your younger self and say, hey, this is the one piece of advice I would give you, what would that be?
And I would give it actually to anyone still young today. Trust in your strengths. And by trusting in your strengths, you can do anything you want.
This was Marlies Gebetsberger, SVP and Head of Philips Personal Health Western Europe. Christina, what are your key takeaways?
You know what? I loved Daniel, throughout the conversation, we would be asking Marlies about like product, and she would always start with the consumer. Here's what the consumer needs.
Oh, really?
Here's the problem we're solving. And it really, you know, starting with the consumer, you can really tell you're speaking with a true marketeer who's trying to have an impact. And I loved also the point that you mentioned, like the way that they have set their culture up is about impact as a word rather than growth. And it really shows.
No, definitely. And it's interesting what you said about the consumer, because it's true, like from like the one blade, which is like much more dynamic, juvenile, after point, bold type of marketing, to doing gadgets for parents, for parents of newborn kids, like the type of messaging and how you position the product is super different. So you do need to like really not be interior focused and say, okay, what are we? It's more like, okay, what's the consumer that we're targeting, wanting to see?
Yes, and then to go the extra mile, everything that he mentioned also about, the Better Than You campaign, as well as the One Plate, as he mentioned about breaking the code. So that's about, having enough trust in your teams and in the strength that you have as a company to go there where others might not dare to go. And at the same time, having the great product. I know that in past podcasts, we might have talked like with people who are more like tech product, and there it's all about I really need to have this really well done, and then I will find a way to sell it. But here it's about here's what the consumer needs, here's how I'm solving the problem, and then here's how I'm reaching out to them where they are. I'm not afraid to go the way the consumer expects me or would be impressed with me. And I also have a really, really good and solid tech behind it to support it.
Yeah, it was interesting to see that, like the two brothers that founded the company, that there was a tech guy and the commercial guy, and how that's really gone through the generations.
Yes, like the duality of the business, that's exactly what it is. On one side, someone making stuff, and the other one being able to understand what it is that we need to make first. And then also, how do I go about talking to people about it and letting them know that the solution for them exists?
Yeah, exactly. What about the leadership part that we talked about? What are your takeaways from that?
Well, I loved that she mentioned learn by observing others. And not many people take the time to pause and see what's happening around them. And in, the regular 70-20-10 kind of framework for learning, that's the 20%. It's about having exposure to other people and really seeing how others are behaving and how you can learn from them. And also, yeah, it's clear that she's working with a balance from the Radical Candor, being a caring person on a personal level, at the same time being able to challenge directly. But I loved how she said that it's not really about having a trick to find the balance. At the end of the day, it's only a means to a result, because what you want to do is to make other people successful. As long as they understand that this is why you are taking any action you're taking, and they have the trust in you that you have their best interest and their success in mind, that's all you need.
Yeah, because then it removes that like defense barrier, or that people can think it's personal or something. If there's that ground rule that it's like, look, I care about you, and sometimes I have to tell you that things are not right because you'll need to know, and I want you to improve. No, I think that helps a lot. And also, but also as a leader, it takes out of humbleness, because then you have to expect that people will treat you the same way, right? And not everybody's prepared for that.
Absolutely, nobody's prepared for that. But also, when it comes to the defensive part, that's one side of why people may not be accepting feedback. But also, they might feel like they actually know. So when you feel like, what, this person really wants me to be successful, I might as well take their feedback into consideration, because they're not just saying because they have to say something, even if I'm not defensive about it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that Philips as well, just to add something, I think interesting, the part of e-com that she mentioned that retailers are learning from them, which is pretty unique. And also the refurbished business, I thought that was very interesting as a business unit, but also like as a mission to kind of evangelize what refurbished products and the quality they have, no?
And the refurbished business overall, especially in electronics, it's huge. It's a huge part that we are not exposed to, and we don't know how big the numbers are. But there is a lot happening right now in the world. But as also Marlies mentioned, and I think that you touched on it, Daniel, as well, there are still consumer barriers on the way that we think about a refurbished product and whether it's good enough or not, as well as for people who are very easy on returning products. Like, people won't mind, buying something from Amazon, check if they like it. If not, they just return it, get their money back, and that's it. But this creates a lot of negative impact on the planet, as well as on the companies themselves, right? Therefore, I feel like all the approach that they're having was very well put under the business transformation rather than just a regular marketing campaign, because that's what they're essentially doing.
Yeah, well, and it's good that they get the confirmation of the recognition. I think it's going to do well, that part of the business. Christina, thanks a lot for your takeaways and for joining us as always. And thanks also to Marlies. Thanks to our listeners, and we'll see you in the next episode of the FMCG Guys every Wednesday and every Saturday.